So tonight's talk is a talk I've never given before, and it's something I've been reflecting on a lot over the last few years, and it's really the role of hope on the spiritual path. You know, what is the role of hope, of trusting these unfolding lives, trusting ourselves, this world? And I find that hope is something we're not necessarily monitoring for. Oh, I'm feeling this amount of hope right now. It's kind of an invisible quality in our awareness, but it impacts how we take in the world. It impacts all parts of our life. It really, it determines whether we're open to the possibilities that are actually always right here. And it determines how engaged we get in our lives and how wholehearted we are and whether we're aligning ourselves with what most matters. So we'll explore this a bit, and since I've never talked about it before, it may be a little bit meandering, and I may end up saying, well, more next week. We'll see. I'd like to start with one of my favorite stories, which is about this arrogant young samurai who bursts in the door of an old monk and bellows, "Monk, tell me the difference between heaven and hell." So the monk sits still for a bit, and he's kind of reflecting, and his response is, "You call yourself a samurai warrior?" He smirks. "Why, look at you. You're nothing but a mere sliver of a man. You'll never amount to more." Well, the samurai, yelling, "What?" He reaches for a sword, and the monk says, "Uh-oh, I can see you reaching for the sword. I doubt you could even cut off the head of a fly with that." The samurai is so infuriated that he pulls the sword out, and he lifts it above the old monk's head, about to strike, and the old monk looks into those seething eyes and says gently, "That is hell." At this, realizing the monk had risked his life to teach this lesson, realizing the possibility of compassion in this universe that the monk was exhibiting, he puts his sword down, he falls to his knees with gratitude. The monk says softly, "That is heaven." So hell, when we're in hell, and it's a trance, as we know, we're believing in our own badness or wrongness or somebody else's badness or wrongness, or that life basically is not unfolding as it should. That's the view of trance, that there's no possibility, there's no innate intelligence or goodness to what's happening. We're caught in that trance of something's wrong. What I like about this story is that the wake-up happens so clearly from the moment he realizes connection. In a moment that we are in a trance and somehow we realize connection, either the love of another person, or we reconnect to some aliveness in our own body, or a sense of kind of a presence that realizes what's happening. In that moment, we come out of trance and this whole world of possibility opens up. Then it becomes possible to live in a way that has gratitude, or to serve, or to savor. We wake up. So I like this kind of contrast of the view of hell being this small trance where there's no possibility and there's no trust in the universe, basically. There's no trust in the universe. And we know that when there's no hope or no possibility, it feels like an eternity. If anybody's been depressed here, and I know a huge percentage of us have, we know the hellishness of that there's no sense of something better is possible. One of the, somebody sent me this a while ago about a guy that goes to hell and Satan greets him and shows him 3 doors and says you have to spend eternity in one of these rooms. And one of the rooms has a whole group of people and they're standing on their heads on a wood floor, hardwood floor. That doesn't look good for eternity, you know. The next room, open the door and they're standing on their head, but it's cement this time. Mm-mm. The next room, they're actually standing around and they're all drinking coffee. They're up to their knees in shit, but they're drinking coffee. And he goes, you know what? better than the other rooms. So he decides, he's kind of feeling good about himself. He chooses that room, and 10 minutes later, Satan says, okay, coffee break is over, back on your heads. So, Woody Allen, he goes, life is full of misery, loneliness, and suffering, and it's over all so short, it's too short, it's too short. It's like wall-to-wall badness. So it makes me think, when I start reflecting on suffering and freedom, on the suffering of really having no hope, no vision, no sense of possibility, of Einstein's famous question. Some of you will remember this. And he said, this is something that is the most important question for all of us to consider, which is this world a friendly place? Do we have a sense that there's some basic benevolence? Not that we look away from the insanity and the cruelty and the horror, but there's some basic intelligence and benevolence to this unfolding creation. Is it a friendly place? And I pose that, or I bring in him posing that, because how we respond to that, this our view of whether there's some basic goodness, will determine in a very direct way our sense of hopefulness. If it's not a benevolent place, if there's a fundamental danger that we're at risk, we'll always be contracted and not open to possibility, not sensing the creativeness and the flow and the dynamic unfolding that's going on. If we say it's neutral, which many people do, which is kind of a, okay, well, it's not good, it's not. If we have a neutrality position, it's, as Einstein puts it, it's like God's playing dice. We're kind of a victim of whatever way it goes. And then if it's friendly, what happens? So I'm just putting it out there. Again, this is to have you begin to reflect. And I'd be curious if you just close your eyes for a moment. And of course, we're going to explore a lot more what we mean by hopefulness. But just at this point, as you reflect on yourself, your own way of experiencing life, beyond the immediate ups and downs that happen, just sense, do I consider myself basically hopeful? Just sense that for yourself. And keeping your eyes closed, I'm going to ask for a voluntary hand raise, only if you're in the mood. That means I'm the only one that gets to know, which is on if there's low level of hope, medium, and high. I'm going to name each one of them, and just raise your hand on where you sense you are. How many of you feel you're kind of on the low end of hope? Thank you. And honor yourself for just being in presence with that. How many a medium level of hope? Thank you. How many feel like you're very hopeful, high end of hope? Thank you. Just so you know, I would say it was about 20% low, 40 and 40 for medium and high, just for your interest. But take a moment just to be present with your own experience on this, and just sense whatever openness there is to exploring further how you might learn about and open to hope. When you'd like to open your eyes. Okay, thank you. So, again, I'm talking about this because, in a sense, I want to say that hope matters. And on the more societal level, there's been an increasing amount of research about hope. It's considered a soft science, and it's getting more and more honored or recognized as being a really key facet in people's experience of happiness. And one of the more recent books, it's a book called Making Hope Happen by Shane Lopez, who comes from the positive psychology tradition, describes some of the research that's gone on that says, kind of on an emotional level, to the degree we have hope, it buffers us from stress, from anxiety, from the effects of difficult events. That in studies of workers over time, those that are hopeful experience more well-being. People that feel hopeful, this is a study of 1 million people in a Gallup poll, say they laugh and smile more than people that aren't. Just stuff that we might already say, yeah. The opposite is hopelessness is the main predictor of suicide, along with isolation. That we can't live without hope. On a physical basis, most of you are familiar with all the placebo research, which is really about hope, which basically says that those who hope that they're going to heal, that have a sense it's possible, and when I say hope, possibility, not that they're fixed on, yes, it'll have to happen, but possibility, heal. Those that think there's possibility have a better shot at healing. And hope, like all mind states, affects our neurochemistry. So what that means is that endorphins get released in the brain, means less pain. It means that our immune system can get strengthened, and Shane Lopez writes, affects respiration, circulation, motor function. So we also know the other side. When somebody loses hope, there's no will to live, and the life force dwindles. On the behavioral level, again, Lopez shows us studies that hope promotes healthy behavior. So if you have hope in life, you're more inclined to, here goes the specifics, eat fruit and vegetables, exercise regularly, practice safe sex, quit smoking. Again, you get the general idea that when there's hope, we engage in activities that move us towards our goals. If we sense the possibility that we can learn or become wise, we study or we listen. If we sense the possibility of intimacy, we learn how to be more present with each other. We take the chance to be vulnerable. If we sense the possibility of spiritual awakening, of realizing more who we really are, we are willing to spend the time stepping out of stories and really being with our moment-to-moment experience. In other words, we will engage and apply ourselves if we sense possibility. So the opposite of that is that when we are hopeless, and the Buddha described doubt as the big freeze to spiritual practice, when we have doubt that anything good can happen, all that's available to us behavior-wise is fight, flight, and freeze. That's it. So it matters. Hope matters. On this human plane and the way we operate, it matters. And yet, if you listen to different spiritual teachers and read the writings, you'll hear a lot of warnings about hope. How many of you are familiar with that strata, that you hear warnings about hoping? Don't hope too much for things. Can I just see by hands? I'm curious how many have encountered that. So I want to bring that into the conversation. Because one of my favorite quotes is T.S. Eliot, who says, "I told my heart to be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing." So there's that sense, so what are we really hoping for? And then in Buddhism, there is a warning about hope. This is Pema Chodron. Hope and fear come from the feeling that we lack something. They come from a sense of poverty. We can't simply relax with ourselves. We hold on to hope, and hope robs us of the present moment. So how do we bring this together? What I'd like to propose is that we distinguish between what we might call egoic hope, or the shadow side of hope, a small hope that's coming out of the ego's wants and fears, and distinguish that from what Hamid Ali calls holy hope. And there's a sense of a hope that really expresses a certain kind of wisdom or realization about how it all is, that allows us to trust and engage in a very beautiful way. And that we distinguish between these. And the markers of the shadow side of egoic hope are the classical grasping, fear, and delusion. And I'll just very briefly go over it. You can start tracking in your own life when you're living from maybe small self-hope versus when there's kind of a happy for no reason and a trust and an engagement and a sense of hopefulness that is not hooked to specific outcomes. Okay, so grasping, when we say, what is the shadow side of hope, it's when there's a fear that something's wrong, or a need, or a have to have something be a certain way. And we can sense it, I'm really hoping for that job promotion, and underneath that there's a grasping. I'm really hoping my child gets into that school, or this person approves of me. And it's always bound with the fear it's not going to happen. The sign of egoic hope is that there's a fear that it's not going to happen. We're hoping for the wrong thing. Often it comes straight from fear, our grasping. There's a story of that atheist who's out in a boat fishing, and the Loch Ness monster appears all of a sudden, flips the boat and opens its mouth as if he's going to swallow the man in the boat. So the guy cries out, "God, help me," that kind of thing. And at once the scene freezes, okay, and the atheist is hanging in midair, and the voice comes booming through the clouds. "I thought you didn't believe in me. Give me a break. I didn't believe in the Loch Ness monster either, So there's that kind of grasping that comes when we're afraid in any moment. Then grasping, fear, and then there's delusion, which is magical hope, or the kind of fantasizing that we all can get caught in, where we're just daydreaming, coming up with a new idea on how to, make a fortune or whatever it is, and not really recognizing limitation or reality. Because true hope isn't something that says, "Oh, I hope I can never die." It's not that kind of thing. There's this thing called management learning, and one of their lessons goes like this. A crow sitting on a tree doing nothing all day. A small rabbit saw the crow and asked him, "Ooh, can I sit like you and do nothing all day?" The crow answered, "Sure, why not?" So the rabbit sat on the ground below the crow and rested. All of a sudden, a fox appeared, jumped on the rabbit, and ate it. Management learning. To be sitting and doing nothing, you must be sitting very, very high up, So we have to watch what we're hoping for. You might just take a moment. Let's pause here and see if you can anchor this in your life. And because my sense is that for each of us, we have an intuitive sense of ego hope versus a more spiritual kind of hope. You might sense where ego hope is going on in your life. You might sense if there's somewhere you're fixated on having something happen a certain way, that a project you're doing works out a certain way, or you get a job, or that somebody in your life behaves a certain way. And to the degree that there's real stickiness, you might sense, where is there real stickiness? Where is there something you really want to happen a certain way, that if it doesn't, it would really pull the rug? Where's your sense of okayness dependent on something going a certain way? And if you land on something, just sense what happens in your body. when your hope is fixated on things going a certain way. What happens in your mind? And most important, because it's entirely natural, every one of us has an ego that's been constructed to hold on to things. Forgive it for being here, but know you want to learn. You want to be awake. Forgive the ego hope. Just regard it with mindfulness. And then begin to wonder, so how does ego hope unfold itself into a more enlightened version? Now, whenever you'd like, you can open your eyes. So we all have signs in our life when we're caught in egoic hope. When I do that exercise, and I'm fixated on wanting, and I got to kind of scan my own life, using this filter a lot over the last few weeks, because the weeks started where there was a lot of demands. I was teaching kind of back to back to back to back on the West Coast, and I had to shuffle a lot of papers around. I had a lot of different people I was meeting with, and in the moments when I wanted things to go a certain way, I watched how I went into all my stories. I was very conceptual. I left my body. It's like that is me on egoic hope. And in the moments when there was a more natural sense of hopefulness, it's really, everything unfolds the way it's going to unfold, and it's really okay. I wasn't in my stories. I was actually feeling alive in my body, and it became very distinctive to me, kind of like a signal system of, controlling, mental in my stories. Okay, fixated hope. I could see the difference. When we're in the hopefulness that has a sense of possibility, we are walking on what's called the bodhisattva path. The bodhisattva path is the path of an awakening being that's living to wake up through all circumstances. And aspiration is right at the heart of it. So what I want to do is offer a kind of a definition for more enlightened or spiritual hope. And the language that I use for myself on this is that it's the aspiration and the trust that life, that includes us, life, unfolds to manifest its highest potential. That our hope, what it's aiming at, and our trust, what it's aiming at, is manifesting what's already here. We're not hoping for something different. Whatever we're hoping for is already part of us. We're hoping to manifest our potential. And it's not just our potential as individuals. We're hoping that the earth, our larger body, can manifest its potential for full health and resilience and resourcefulness. Manifesting what's already here. So again, the difference is not, with hope, is not that we get what the ego wants, but that we manifest our potential for loving, for creating, for wisdom, for full presence. I was reading Václav Havel's description of hope. He describes it as an attribute we carry in us always when it's this more spiritual hope. He says it's a state of being that's not dependent on any particular outcome. So it's a dimension of soul. And again, I mentioned Hamid Ali, I think, earlier. He describes hope as holy hope, that it's actually one of the expressions of awakened heart-mind. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to describe the three components that make up this holy hope, this hope that's really liberating hope. And the three components I'm going to cover are aspiration, that we have this longing to manifest, trust, that we sense the possibility of manifesting, and dedication, that we actually invest our energy into the manifesting. Okay? Aspiration, trust, and dedication. And so this gives us a kind of a context, and then this week and in following weeks we can start exploring how do we nourish those, each of those. But I'll go over first I'll go over them each one. And aspiration, for aspiration to be real aspiration, for our longing to be real longing, it can't be conceptual. It can't be an idea that I want spiritual freedom or an idea that I want intimacy. It has to be a felt, embodied longing. And it has to be a longing for something that actually can be experienced right here and now. There's never in the future. It's always, a taste of it's always here now. So just as a flower longs to blossom, or an acorn has this urge to unfold itself into an oak, aspiration is again about manifesting what's possible. And that's the Bodhisattva's aspiration, that we all have the seeds of Buddha nature. Every one of us here has those seeds of consciousness, of love, of aliveness, that if we nourish, can become fully radiant, enlightened heart-mind. So, aspiration is felt. It's a felt sense of longing to belong to our fullness. And it's also got a vision to it. There's a clarity of seeing. You can actually imagine, image in that manifesting, because it's already, like the oak's already in the acorn. So there's some template inside us, so we can have a vision of what's possible. And we need to have a vision. A vision isn't like we're taking ourselves out of the present moment. It's embedded in the present moment and we're making it conscious. Does that make sense? I know some of this sounds a little abstract, but you can actually practice with it and it works. So the Hebrew prophets warn that without vision, people perish. We need this core element of hope, this aspiration. Some of you might have read an article that came out in June's New Yorker, and it was really interesting. It was about Japan and the suicide rate in Japan. Can I just see by hands how many of you read that? Just look around. So it's always interesting to me to. Thank you. The gist of it is Japan is experiencing 3 times the suicide rate of this country. Like once every, I think it's 15 minutes, somebody kills themselves, and there's these favorite places that people go to, and it's kind of there's a lot that supports it in the culture, that as opposed to the creed in the West, that it's a kind of violation of our life. There's some pride and some glory to it. So this article talks about a young monk who has dedicated himself to working with people who are suicidal because they're so deep, the depression and the suicidal tendencies in the culture. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what he's doing a little bit later, but one thing he does is he has these workshops where people come together, and one of the exercises in the workshop is something some of you might remember doing with me or elsewhere, where he'll ask these questions, and people will sit with a piece of paper in front of them, and the questions are, if you had 3 months to live, what would you do? What would you want to do? And if you had 1 month to live, consider that, what would you want to do? And if you had a week to live, what would you want to do? And if you had just 10 minutes to live, what would be important to you? Okay? I think he frames it if you got diagnosed with cancer and this is what you knew you had, but you could do in those ways. And then there's this inquiry of like, okay, if you had a week to live or 10 minutes to live, what would you want to do and what would it be like? What is it you're really wanting? So in the article, they describe one man who he was weeping after those questions were posed. In fact, a lot of people were. Remember, these are people that were suicidal. And his paper was blank. And he had only thought about killing himself. He had not, for as long as he could remember, considered what he would want to do, what really, really mattered. In other words, he hadn't reflected on that aspiration. What does your heart long for? So just recognizing that insight was freeing for him. And it turns out he went back to work and he went back to his life. And again, suicidal depression means usually a pulling away in a very big way from life, including the largest ways, which are the shut-ins, where the people that just completely withdraw into their house, don't go outside, don't do anything. Total contraction from the life flow. He re-entered just with that inquiry. What would you want to do?